Hi, Tim. How are you?
Hey, I'm great, Carl. How you doing today?
I'm fantastic. And thanks to all of you for joining. I'm Carl Boyd. Most of you probably know me from the Morning Drive segment where I host that in X Spaces. Today, I'm hosting the town hall webinar with Boron One Holdings, as you all know. There will be a Q&A portion of this when Mr. Daniels has done his presentation today. So I will take your questions after. Please put them in the chat. I guess that's it for me. Tim, take it away.
I'll take it away. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to our conference call of Boron One Holdings. Um, uh, I'll give you a quick rundown of what we're going to do today and how we're going to do it, and then we'll get right into it. So first, I'll go through a brief forward-looking statement just to caution you that some of the things that we say here today might be forward-looking information under Canadian securities legislation, including statements regarding the timing of future mineral resource estimates, PEA estimation of mineral resources, exploration results, potential mineralization, exploration mine development plans, timing of the commencement of operation, and future production. And this is based on future expectations that involve a number of business risks and uncertainties. And so words like believe, expect, feel, plan, anticipate, project, could, should, and other similar expressions generally are identified as forward-looking statements. And forward-looking statements are subject to significant risks and uncertainties and other factors that could cause actual results to differ materially from the expected results. So participants should not place undue reliance on forward-looking statements. So there's a whole bunch more that I could read, but you get the gist of it. So be cautioned that anything that I say that appears to be forward-looking comes with a certain amount of risk to it. I'll quickly go through the purpose of the call and the structure of it, and then we'll get right into it. And so, once again, I'm Tim Daniels. I'm President and CEO of Boron One. And after my brief presentation, I'll be available to answer your Q&A. Thank you all for attending today. I know that there's other places you could be, so I do appreciate you taking the time to hear our update. Purpose of the call is to provide you with a corporate update and clarification of ongoing matters that are already in the public domain. In other words, what this call is not, it's not being held to make any new public announcement of any new business development. We will not reveal any material information that's not already in the public domain. Our purpose here is only to, add clarity the best I can to ongoing publicly known events. In fact, we, along with all other public companies, cannot legally use this type of forum to release any new information. All we can do in a meeting like this is an update and clarification of existing material. So don't be disappointed because there wasn't some great new, reveal here today. I will attempt to keep it as short as possible. I know sometimes in the past these calls went long. I'm hoping that's not the case here today. And so the rules for the call, we've provided virtually unlimited access for the public and shareholders particularly to listen in on the call. And shareholders are invited to type your questions, and Carl will go through those and get as many of those over to me as possible. And I apologize in advance if we aren't able to get to each and every question, but we'll do the best we can. As I said, nothing will be discussed here on the call unless it's already public information. But I do hope to add some clarity to some ongoing matters. And again, specifically, we will not answer questions or provide information that require me to, speculate or reveal information that's not in the public domain today, or divulge trade secrets that would cause Boron One, to lose potential competitive advantage in the industry. As everyone here, all the old veterans of the boron business know that it is a small closed business, that it's tightly held by the players in it, and so companies like ours that kind of are much more open with our disclosure of information are in some ways at a competitive disadvantage. We know that that's a sword that cuts two ways, that we do have to release a certain amount of information publicly in order to attract and keep shareholders and attract new investment in the company. Whereas big companies or governments that are the other major players in the industry don't have those same problems, and so they're far more tight-lipped about their disclosures than we are. Also, there are situations where we have signed NDAs with potential partners or others that prohibit us from divulging specifics like names and ongoing terms and so on and so forth. Items I'm going to be discussing here, the exploitation field application status. I think that's top of everybody's mind right now, and so I'll give an update on that. Strategic industry partners, what's going on there, status of the Poberjay, the small deposit on the other side of the basement, and our cooperation plans. Other plans that we've got with Ebar Mines or their parent company, Resavicha, regarding our other assets that we could use at Piscania, and then talking briefly about the last step in the licensing process after the exploitation field approval, and then we go into a Q&A. So let's get right into these points, which is the reason why we're all here today. So first, talking about the exploitation field approval status. Just a very quick recap. We received our certification of the reserve early in 2024. I think it was January of 2024. Which is a certification of the geological resource calculation, which is the first step in the mining licensing process. And that allows us to move into the second step of the licensing process, which is the completion of the Serbian compliant feasibility study and an environmental impact scoping, so not the full environmental study itself, but the outline or the scope and depth of what would be included in the environmental impact assessment. Because the feasibility study was based on the information that was approved in the certification of the reserve, there was a lot of information that couldn't be finalized in the feasibility study until we had the final approval of the certification of the reserve. So as I said, we got the certification of the reserve in January of 2024. So it took the engineering team about 6 months to make the final additions and changes and updates to the feasibility study based on the new parameters or updated parameters within the certification of the reserve, and get that ready to file. And so that was finally finished by about July of 2024, so about a year ago, and was submitted to the ministry. A couple months later, we got back the first review statement from them, and the response back was that there was some supplemental information and some clarification that the ministry wanted of us and gave us 30 days in which to provide that information. So we did that as requested and on time. And so it was late in 2024 that we were able to provide that information back to the ministry. There was one piece of information that they had requested, which technically wasn't required for the feasibility study. It was technically material that is required in the next phase, but we had completed it anyway, and that was work that we were doing on the metallurgical side with ALS out of Australia. Um, we didn't have the results back quite yet, though, to include in that package late in 2024 when we resubmitted the appendix to the feasibility study back to the ministry. And so we apprised them of that fact that there was this one piece of data that we were yet to receive back, and it was out of our control because it was in the hands of a third-party lab for analysis. We got that information in early of 2025, and so that information was included in the appendix, and so that new appendix or the newly completed feasibility study went back into the hands of the mining ministry. I'm going to say around the end of January or into February of this year of 2025. So therefore, the ministry has had our full package for the exploitation of for the approval of the exploitation field for about 5 months now, give or take, maybe going on to 6 months. It's a sizable package. When I say sizable, it includes the geological elaborate, which itself was a couple thousand pages. That in tandem with the feasibility study itself, which was, many more hundreds and hundreds of pages, plus charts and graphs and spreadsheets and whatnot. So it's a sizable package that went into the ministry. And as I said, they've had it in their hands for about 5 or 6 months. One comment that I've had coming back at me, and Blake the same, for the past couple of months now, is the term, why the delay? Why is it taking so long? And I think that it's improper to say that what has been going on has been a delay. Using the term delay has the wrong connotation, because a delay implies some sort of a problem. There has been no problem. And so what has been termed by a lot of shareholders as a delay, which, as I said, kind of has the undertone of delay equals problem. What there's actually been is not a problem, but a misjudgment as to how long the approval process would actually take. And why? Why, misjudgment on that? Well, we have three things that we can use to judge how long it would take, because the ministry doesn't actually come to us and say, thank you for the submission, we'll have it back to you by June 1st. There's no such dialogue that actually happens. We give it to them, and you get an answer back when you get an answer back. And until you get an answer back, you don't know the status of it, period. And so we have three things to go on: is our history dealing with the mining ministry with other submissions. We have precedent of other companies making submissions to the government, and we have what the law says. So let's look at those three. So our history, from the time we've started in Serbia, getting our next approval, and to this point in time, it's been approvals for renewal of our exploration licenses. And those renewals are not sizable documents. They're maybe a dozen to 20 pages. And I think, in my estimate, the shortest, the quickest we've gotten our exploration license approved, the quickest turnaround on that has been about 3 months. And I can remember a couple examples where it took around 6 months. And that was for, a dozen-page renewal of an exploration license. And so that's been our history, is that our process for a small exploration renewal, license renewal, has taken, 3 to 6 months. Um, Precedent, other companies going through mine licensing, well, there is none. To our knowledge and what we've seen, there's been no new mine development, not significant mine. There's been gravel pits open and other similar, very small scale operations that have been opened over the last few years. But in terms of a new mining operation, there's literally been nothing in Serbia for the last 20 years. So there is no precedent that we can look at. We can't say, okay, there's been a dozen mines open in the last 5 years, and how long did those processes take? There's nothing like that to look at. So there's no precedent to fall back on. And so the third point is, what does the law say? The law says that the ministry will use their best efforts to turn around licenses in a 90-day period. We've never experienced that. That's never been fully applied in our case in the past. And we know with other mining companies doing exploration in Serbia, it's been the same sort of situation. So it's not that we've been singled out or that our paperwork was less sufficient than other companies or anything like that. When other companies that I know of that have been operating, it's taken them every bit as long, or in some cases much longer, to get their exploration licenses renewed than it has taken us. Um, so that's why I say that, using the term delay, that our exploitation field approval has been delayed, is the wrong connotation, because there hasn't been a problem in the process. It's going along as it should go along. And if there's been a mistake, it's been in our estimate as to how quickly it might be turned around. Um, Having said all that, I am expecting that the ministry is ending their process of review of our application, of our feasibility study, an application for exploitation field. Now, that's just my guess. We've heard nothing positive or negative, nothing at all from the ministry, which isn't unusual, because they just don't, until you get a response back from them. You hear nothing, and that's one area where they've been very consistent. Um, and again, I'm not surprised that it's taken many months for them to complete this process, as the submitted documentation is, it's sizable. It's a very large, very technical document, and the review process. It's not a rubber stamp approval. Although it doesn't go through an outside vetting process like the elaborate did, which goes to an outside committee of mining experts. This is done at the ministry itself. But still, though, it's not just a rubber stamp process. And I think that maybe the process, and again, this is me speculating, so this is not something that's come out of the ministry. Um, but my guess is that they're being even more careful today than they have been in the past. Um, on a couple fronts. One is on the environmental front, so the review of any submission of documentation that has to do with environmental. I think Serbia, like every country in the world, is taking that issue far more serious today, and it's being scrutinized by outside agencies, by NGOs, and environmental groups and outside governments, making sure that that everything is done to the highest standards environmentally. That's one issue. Another issue for those of you, which I think are probably most of you, who have been, longer term shareholders, I'm sure all of you have heard over the past several months that, the tragic accident that happened in Novi Sad, a city in the northern part of Serbia, that where some new construction of the roof on a train station had collapsed. Well, now, while that has nothing to do with us or with mining, for sure, um, you can bet that there are some government officials who probably today are quite worried or nervous, and under review, um, because they may have been the ones who signed off on some faulty engineering that went into that tragic accident. Um, Quite possibly, and so my guess, again, just speculation, that I think that probably all the ministries today, more than ever so in the past, are probably going through all documentation very carefully and taking it very seriously, and that approvals are not just rubber stamp. That doesn't mean that there's a delay or a problem, but it does mean that they're being thoroughly vetted, and we welcome that. We have nothing to hide. We believe that we've conducted all of our research and studies, and all of our work, to the highest of international standards, and so we have no fear of scrutiny of the work that we've done. Um, Another point, I know that when our elaborate was being reviewed by the outside panel, for the certification of the reserve, I was shocked to learn at that time that, when we submitted it, that there was a substantial number. And when I say substantial, I'm talking dozens of elaborates that were ahead in the process, ahead of us, for approval with that committee. And again, most of those, if not all of them, were, smallish, maybe open pit gravel pits or similar such, small development mining operations that were looking to be developed. But nevertheless, we weren't top of the pile. We had to wait our turn in the process. And there's no reason to think that when we submitted this feasibility study, that we were top of the pile. There quite likely were and is, several feasibility studies from other projects being developed that were ahead of us, and that we have to wait our turn in the queue. And so that's just a part of the process that we should expect. So again, when I've been hearing for the last month or two or three that why the delay? Why the delay? I kind of bristle to that term because I absolutely don't see it as a delay. I absolutely don't see it as any underlying problem. I see it that we're just going through the normal course approval process, and hopefully we're about to come out the other side of that process. I've been asked, is the ministry withholding this approval subject to some other condition or a sequential event? And the answer is no. There is just Absolutely nothing else. This is a standalone process based on our feasibility and our environmental scoping study, nothing else. So it's not like they've come back to us and said, well, we can't approve, the exploitation field until such and such and such. No, that precedent does not exist. So there's nothing else that they're waiting for. Um, and I've been asked, do I believe that the ministry is waiting for submission of phase 3 documentation first? Again, the answer is absolutely not. In fact, we are not even allowed to submit our mine designs until we have approval of the exploitation field. Not to mention that it's impossible for us to finish the mine designs until our feasibility study has been completely and fully approved and vetted. So no, absolutely not. That's not the case at all. So I just want to, dispel those sorts of preconditions that some people have believed might be leading to this quote unquote delay. Um, and the other thing I want to point out is that while the approval process seems to have taken quite some time, I believe that Serbia's process is actually quite short compared to other jurisdictions around the world. Right in our own backyard in British Columbia, mining companies are told to expect that it takes 3 to 4 years or more just to get approval on their environmental study. Not to get all their approvals, just for their environmental study approval is a 3 to 4 year process, 3 to 4 year process. And that to get all the approvals can take 7 or more years. And so in fact, the whole approval process in Serbia is probably not that bad, relative to some other jurisdictions that we're familiar with. So again, and not to beat a dead horse, but uh, delay is really not the correct terminology in the sense that there's some unexpected problem that's holding us back. We're just in the process, and unfortunately, that process doesn't always move as fast as we'd like. But we hope and expect that it's coming to a quick close now. So that's all I've got to say on that, unless there's more questions that come about. Next point I wanted to talk about quickly is just strategic industry partners. We've been in process, as I've mentioned before, with a couple potential strategic partners that absolutely are our textbook ideal partners for us, and the type of agreement that we would enter into with them would be a multifaceted agreement. In other words, their interest in this extends beyond just investing in us. It extends just beyond just buying product from us. They want to fully integrate into the project over the long term. The technical due diligence process with a couple of these companies has been very long and very slow and very methodical. They have a lot of boxes to check, and they don't take any shortcuts. They make sure that they go through it very, very carefully, and most projects that they look at die at this point, meaning they get filtered out and don't get approved to move on to the next phase. And the good news for us is that we've passed through that. And so in both of these cases, with a couple, absolutely perfect potential partners for us, we've now pivoted from technical due diligence to business structuring, and we fully expect this phase of the relationship development to move along much more quickly than the technical due diligence phase did. So I'm very, very pleased and excited and happy by where we're at and where we're headed with these potential partners. And these are, by no means, no small potential deals for us. And so that's good on one side. On the other side, it also means that we have to move very carefully and methodically forward, to make sure that we're doing things properly, because some of these events we wouldn't be able to unwind, and so we've got to make sure we don't misstep. And so I think what I really want you to take home today from this part of the conversation is that we're advancing with a couple, major partners. I'm very excited by the prospect of who these partners are, and that the longest, slowest, hardest part of the process with them is behind us, and we're now moving into the fun part, which is the business development stage. So stay tuned, and as we've got more to say, of course, we'll circle back and talk about it. Next thing I wanted to talk about is the Povergy cooperation, and a quick update there. Again, a lot of people have been asking, where are we at in this process? Why has it been taking so long? And important to understand that our discussions and negotiations with Resovice over the last several months have been primarily focused on specific technical issues surrounding the upgrading and the refurbishing of the Povergy mine. And while the mine itself is small, there's still some key technical issues that need to be carefully thought through and decided before proceeding, both on the mining methodology that's deployed, which would be somewhat different than what they've used till today, because up until this point in time, it's just been kind of ma and pa hobby mining is what I like to call it, where they've done 1,000 tons a year type of thing, and we're talking about taking that up to a substantially higher number, and so it requires some careful thought as to how to properly refurbish. And there's a number of different mining methods that could be deployed. And depending on those mining methods, it also has some bearing on what processing methods that are being deployed. And so so we've needed a number of meetings over a period of a number of months to get to the point where we've landed on the redevelopment plan. We've done that now, and so that part of the process is very quickly now nearing completion, and so again, kind of like our discussions with strategic partners on Piscania, we're now pivoting with Povergy away from the pure technical issues to the business side. And the business side is easy because this is something that we've discussed long ago and mostly agreed upon, and it's mutually beneficial. And so that part of it, in my estimate, is not going to take a whole lot of time or energy resources to get from this point to the completion of a binding agreement. So it's moving forward nicely. Again, I've been asked some questions about this, like what impact does this have on the Piscania mining license? And the answer is none. The Povergy and Piscania will run on their own tandem tracks, and one has nothing to do with the other, or one is not dependent on the other. Although there are some benefits to Piscania from us being involved with Povergy, in that it makes for a very good pilot project, and we can use the processing equipment that we're looking to deploy at Portage as the pilot equipment that would be necessary to do bulk sample testing on the ground at Piscania as well. So there is some redeployment of assets that can be used from one to the other, and so there is some benefit that way. And of course, there's the other benefits of getting into Portage, like the it can potentially generate some significant cash flow for us and do that quickly. It gets us into the boron business now and helps us to establish relationships with off-takers and so there's really no downside for us for getting involved with Portage, but it is a standalone project and if for some reason at the end of the day it didn't happen, would that have any substantial or significant bearing on Piscania? No, and that was the specific question that was asked of me. And the other thing that was asked of me is, are meetings continuing on, given that we're in the summer period? And the answer is yes. The meetings are continuing forward. So stand by for some updates on that as we move forward. And again, potentially, even though it's a small project, it could have some potential material impact on us. Regarding the other side of the cooperation that we're talking to with Resavica or Ebar Mines, and that's the redeployment of some of their assets at Piscania. And those discussions they continue forward, but they're secondary at this point to getting the deal done with Portage, just because we have more time to work on the completion of the vending in of assets into Piscania. So we're focused more on Portage first. But the discussions do continue forward for some of their assets, including land, roads, rail, power, some of their workers, office space, and more. So there's a number of material assets that we could deploy at Piscania, and they'd be very helpful for us. So those conversations continue as well. Really, the last thing I wanted to talk about here today is the future steps. So looking beyond us getting the approval of the exploitation field. The third and final step in the mine licensing process is the approval of the mine designs, mine and processing designs, and the approval of the full environmental impact assessment. And the official name of that is, escapes me at the moment. I think I wrote it down here somewhere. Yeah, the approval for the construction and operation of the mining facility. So very generic name, but if you hear me refer to that, that's the third step in the licensing process. As we announced a short time ago, our environmental impact assessment is complete. But it actually gets its final approval with the mine designs as this third step. I have been asked if this report is available for viewing, and the answer is no, not at this time. It is, subject to some revisions, even though it's completed. As environmental laws get updated, this document will get updated. As we have changes in our mine plans, the document will get changed, updated to reflect that. So it's a living document that will continue to be updated and revised on an ongoing basis to reflect ongoing realities. Likely it's never finished. It continues to grow and evolve. But certainly at this point, there's no plan to release that publicly. I've been asked what's the status of the design of the mine and processing plans and the submission of same as the third step. Well, this third step is dependent on the exploitation field approval as the trigger, absolutely. And I was asked, well, gee, aren't we, well into the third approval timeline? And the answer is no, because the clock doesn't start ticking for the third approval submission deadline until after the exploitation field approval has been granted. And at that point, once that's been granted, we've got 2 years to complete and submit the mine designs. So the clock hasn't started ticking on that, and there really isn't much more that we can do on the actual mine design plans until the feasibility studies and processing studies in the feasibility have been vetted and fully fleshed out. We have developed the scope of the mine and processing design plans, and even the scope of that plan itself is a substantial document. It's dozens and dozens of pages that just set out the paragraph headers of the work that needs to go into the actual mine designs, and we have put out what we can, that document along with the work in progress feasibility study and environmental study to a couple engineering groups for them to start, calculating their bid. But it is an evolving document as well, and the final production plans are still a work in process and are somewhat related to the final decisions made by the government on the feasibility, but also some of the ongoing partner discussions that we've got and what their needs are in terms of final product and final quantities and so on and so forth. So we've kind of gone as far as we can at this point with respect to the actual mine design plans. And once that's all done and submitted, you then have once you get approval for that, you've got 5 years thereafter to actually build the mine, and which so the government gives a nice big window in which to complete the actual work, even though we're anticipating that the construction phase is all things going as they should, 18 to 24 month process. So that's really the key part of the update that I wanted to say. But I think it's really important for me to point out that it's time to refocus our attention in this project and in this company. Very few projects, and I know you've heard this before from me, but it's so true, and it's a point worth making over and over and reminding ourselves. Very few projects ever reach this point. How rare is it? Depending on whose numbers you hear, only about 1 in every 10,000 mineral discoveries ever lead to a mine development. Think about that. So for every 10,000 projects that go through some level of exploration, only one of them becomes an operating mine. not great odds. In our case, well, yes, we don't have an operating mine at this point, but we have substantially de-risked this project, and we've proven, to many potential joint venture partners that we have an economic deposit that is, worthy of development into a mine, and we're well down that road towards developing a mine. Not many projects ever get to this stage of development. And we've done it. We've got the scrapes and bruises and scars to prove it. It's been, a long, hard grind, but we're still standing. We're almost over that hump where we're in mine development stage, and we still own 100% of the project, and we still have the upside potential within the Yarrandall Basin, and some potential with the small deposit potentially as well. Um, and so we could have, and in fact did in the past, try to take on partners at earlier stages. And I think serendipitously, that would have led to much more dilution, in my opinion, and lower financial gain for all of us than the situation that we're in today. I think we've substantially de-risked this project. I think the boron market is getting stronger and stronger all the time. Boron continues to be, one of the key critical materials recognized globally as such. Um, and so we're in a really, really good place today. And I think any one of the first three events that I spoke of first, which is, our exploitation field approval, a partnership coming through with a large strategic partnership, and or the Povergy, and all three of those are well along the path to completion. Any one of those significantly improves our fundamentals and helps de-risk this project, even further. So I think we're in a really good place. And so I think that, the bottom line is that all the reasons why, you and I got excited about this project to begin with, whenever it was that we got involved, um, all those reasons continue to be there today, and in fact improve, and have been substantially de-risked than what they were a year ago. And that point was de-risked from 2 years ago, and so on and so on as you go backwards. And so I think we're, in the best place corporately that we've ever been in terms of the fundamentals. Now, our market doesn't reflect that, but therein lies the opportunity, in my opinion. I think that again, in my opinion, I think that, we're undervalued based on, the improving fundamentals of the project in the ground, and the fact that we continue to de-risk it. So that's really what I think is the key for all of us to continue on a daily basis when we, think about Boron One. Those are the points that are, what continue to drive me forward every day, knowing that this thing, in my opinion, is going to be a going concern mine, and is going to be worth a whole lot more than where it's trading at today. And that's just my opinion. But that's what, keeps me, driving onward. Anyway, I'd like to open it up at this point, to some questions that we might have. Let me turn my speaker back on, because I shut it off because I was getting some feedback earlier. It sounds like I still am, but hopefully it's not too annoying, and I can field the questions. So
Yeah, thanks for the presentation today in the chat, Tim. That feedback is on your end. We can't hear it at all. So if that helps
Okay,
you at
good.
all.
Good.
I know that would still be annoying for you. We don't have any questions right now, so I'm going to encourage everyone to go in the Q&A, put your questions there. Let us know or let Tim know, how long have you been a shareholder for? When have you gotten involved in the company? Um, I have a question for you though, Tim. Let's talk a little bit more about the boron market. It is a little difficult for sometimes for people to get information on it. Maybe you follow a little closer. You might have more contacts in that space than the average shareholder. Is there any insights you can give us?
Mm. Okay, sorry. Again, the feedback is a little bit bothersome. So if you could repeat the question once more.
Yeah, are there any insights you can give us, shareholders, on the boron market itself? It is hard to get information, but you might have better contacts than us.
Okay. Sure. Let me mute myself once more as I give the answer, and I'll turn it on again after the fact. Yes. So the boron market um, continues to solidify. Boron is considered a critical material globally, in North America, in Asia, in Europe, in all the significant markets around the world. Boron is definitely considered one of the minerals that is in great demand, of strategic importance, especially for decarbonization, and is in a very limited supply. And so, for those reasons, consumers of boron, whether they be glass companies or defense contractors or fertilizer companies or whoever it might be, need to you know, uh, take heed and pay special attention to how they're securing their long-term supply chains of boron. And it's for that reason that we're finding that historically, when we would speak with a, a company that is interested potentially in giving us an offtake contract to buy some of our boron. Historically the attitude was, yeah, sure, we'll talk to you. Come back when your mine is built, and if your price is competitive, yada yada. Maybe we'll look at it, and kind of attitude. And again, they were of the attitude that when they needed their boron on Friday, they would pick up the phone on Monday and they'd have their new delivery on Friday, and all was well. The world has changed. A lot of companies realized that during the pandemic. They found out that their supply chains were a lot more um, fragile than they thought that they might be. And um, that combined with the fact that decarbonization has become the buzzword globally. Every government, every NGO, every environmental agency, every responsible corporation and private citizen globally is talking about global warming and what to do about it, how to get off carbon. Well, if you're trying to get off carbon, all the green energies need a significant amount of boron. Whether you're talking about solar panels or wind turbines or electric motors, nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, making our houses more energy efficient, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, making our crop rotations more efficient because there's more and more people to feed and less agricultural land globally. Every one of those things that I just mentioned require a substantial and growing amount of boron, and they'll need it for decades and decades to come. And in fact, some of the estimates that I've seen call for about a 10 times increase in the demand of boron over the next decade or so as a result of decarbonization. And so there's a lot of companies out there now that their attitude has changed. Where, like I said, a few years ago, it was, yeah, call us back when you get a mine built and we'll talk to you. Now, those guys are calling us saying, we want to talk about a long-term partnership where we're involved with, the mine for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So their attitude has changed towards us substantially. And so that is the single most obvious way that our reality has changed, that people are starting to come at us and interested in these long-term partnerships. And then on top of that, you're seeing boron prices continue to move up in a meaningful fashion, and so on. So beyond a doubt, decarbonization has had a significant impact on boron. So, and one of the great things from our perspective about boron is that you can literally count all the boron mines in the world on one hand. And on the other side of it, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of companies that need boron for hundreds and hundreds of products that we all use every day, all around us. And it's growing, and there is no substitution. So all the things that boron is being used for, it's not like, if boron gets too expensive, we'll substitute something else for it. No, for most of these applications that boron is used in, it's either you have boron or you don't make that stuff. And it's the stuff we rely on, like I said, the insulation in our walls and the ceramic tiles under our feet and the solar panels on our roof, the steel roll cage in our car, the fertilizers we put onto our crops, and on and on and on and on and on. Just hundreds and hundreds of everyday products, including the screens that we're all looking into right now. If I could find my cell phone, I'd hold that up and show you, but because the glass on your cell phone is about 12 to 15% boron in it. And so life as we know it would be substantially different without boron. So yeah, it's not an overstatement to say, boron is extremely impactful on Earth, and it doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon.
All right, we definitely got a few questions here for you, Tim.
Okay.
I'm going to start with Joseph. What would be your estimated timeline for the project to be fully operational as a producer?
Good question. And let me mute myself once again. I really hate hearing myself talk. Difficult to say because of the gaps in between that are times that, like we're in right now, waiting for government approvals, because it's very, very difficult. I can tell you with some confidence how much time we need to complete work from our side, and then we pass it over, for approval, and that's where it becomes a bit of a black box. That makes it difficult to estimate. So we've completed, as I said, the second phase, which is the feasibility study, and that's in for submission. There is some work that we need to do on the ground, and this is not exploration related work, but it's development related work. Questions that the engineers need answered before that they can make some final decisions on mine designs and so on. That along with pilot project and the actual mine designs and so on, that realistically is about an 18-month run from start to finish of our work. and then it goes over, to the government for approval. The last phase, which is the actual construction of the mine itself, again, my engineers are telling me that in the perfect world scenario, it could be done in about 18 months. Realistically, you allow about 24 months for it to happen. So those are the timelines that we need to do our work. How much in between, for the government to give their approvals. That was the the basis of my earlier conversation. Now that it's difficult to estimate, but reasonable to say that each one of those periods is probably, on average a 6 month period, let's say, to get the feedback from the government and approval from the government. So
So
that's about the best I can give you in terms of timeline right now.
all right. The next question was a timeline question. What is the timeline to get part 3 documents once the exploration field is granted?
Yeah.
Exploitation is
So
granted.
again, for us, for the work we need to do, about 18 months. Now, some of that, can happen quicker. Some of it you don't know until you get into it. There is some additional metallurgical work that we need to do. We've done the preliminary levels of metallurgical work, so we know that there are some derivative products that we want to produce and that we're able to produce. We've taken our raw material, which is called colemanite, and we've been able to produce a finished product from that, either boric acid or borax. The next step in that work, though, is you want to optimize that process, which we haven't done yet. So step one was just, can we do it? Can we make boric acid? Can we make borax? We've answered that. And that's the biggest single question to answer, but we've answered that. Second point is to optimize the formulation and the workflow. And that takes a few months of work to see of your various inputs, what is the ideal mix of various products and times, should it be mixed at 60 degrees for 1 hour at this grind, or for 45 minutes at this temperature at this grind, and so there's variations to the overall process that the metallurgists need to play with until you come up with that optimized process. And then once you've done that, you scale up and you do a full pilot study on site, not of a few kilos or even a few 100 kilos, but now you're dealing with several tons of material before you actually build a plant for millions of euros. You want to make sure that it works on a smaller scale, on a project level, and sometimes there's some retooling that is a part of that. So you do the work. Fingers crossed, if it all goes great, you then proceed to actually, build out your processing plant. But oftentimes it won't. Oftentimes, as you scale up, you'll find different issues that need to be fine-tuned, and it needs to go back to the drawing board. And so, in the perfect world scenario, to finish this next phase of work, if everything goes perfectly, and it could, we'd need about 18 months. If some of these things need some, retooling, rethinking, and do the work over again, then that timeline stretches out from there. But hopefully we're able to stay on that sort of a path, or 18-month timeline.
Approximately how much money will be required to get to part 3 documents submitted? And then the next one was all through PPs. I'll just leave that there. I don't know if he's suggesting, are you doing all this through private placements with financing it? But those are the two last questions from Luke.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll answer the second one first, and that's that our discussion now with potential partners is having them come in at this stage. So not not waiting and coming in when the mine is built or when we've got the next approval or when anything future happens, but rather to have their involvement now. And we've had those conversations, and it kind of went like this, where where I said to them, you could wait. You could wait till, well, whenever you want. You could, literally wait till the mine is built and then approach us to see if we're interested in some sort of a deal, or at any point between now and that point. And I said, but here's what you risk in waiting. Two things primarily. One is that as we advance the project, as we de-risk it further and further by doing more and more work, what we're going to ask for your participation in it goes up. Number one. So in other words, it's going to cost you more. The longer you wait, the more it's going to cost you to get involved. That's point one. Point two is that if you wait too long, we might not need you at all or want you at all as a partner because somebody else stepped in, because we are talking with multiple potential partners. So the second risk is the bigger risk, that they lose out altogether in their opportunity to participate by waiting too long. And they've agreed that those are are huge risks for them, and a much smaller risk is the risk of involving at this point and becoming a partner sooner than later. And so that is the direction that the conversations have taken. And so the plan with these potential partners is for them to come in now at these levels, at these points, not at the Boron One level, but at the project level, because uh, again, they don't buy shares in public companies. That's not what they do. It's not what they're looking to do. And frankly, that's not what we want as shareholders of Boron One. We would suffer too much dilution to have them come in at the pubco, at the public company level, certainly at these times and levels. So that doesn't make sense for us. And so instead, everything is being valued based on the project itself and their participation in the project, not in Boron One. And by doing that, we suffer far less dilution. And so the answer to your second question is that no, we're not looking to raise the money that we need to get from here through to breaking ground by doing private placements. Not for that work, of course. There'll be a small burn on the administrative side that there always is with running a public company, and that won't go away. Um, but the substantial money, and some of these things are quite substantial, like the actual mine designs themselves. You're looking in the neighborhood of a few million euros just for those mine designs. These are not cheap, easy documents, and but we are looking at the potential partners funding those at the project level, and doing that now at this point in time. And the overall cost, it can vary depending on a number of things, because there's some level of work that we can do, but we don't have to do some things in there that are optional. And so on average, without the optional pieces, you're looking at a budget that's between about 4 to 5 million to do all the work that's needed to do to get to the point of breaking ground.
So the next question is from Dan. While time goes while time goes on waiting on a response from the Serbian officials, can you comment on corporate operating funds that are currently remaining? And if and when, what approximate amounts of additional funding from shareholders, such as further unit offerings, might be required? Also, what might be the range of revenue to Boron One for the small deposit after any wise and cautionary safety upgrades are completed and all required approvals are in place?
Yeah. Um, Let me kill this guy. And I'm not going to talk about the small deposit numbers until we complete the agreement. Other than to say that, while it's small deposit, it can throw off some significant cash flow, especially for a company that has zero cash flow like us. And that the operation, again, while modest, can be, quite profitable. In other words, quite high margins, even though the top line revenue numbers are not you know so stellar. But until we complete all the negotiations, I'm not at any liberty to talk any further, publicly about what that might look like. It would just be speculation at this point, and I don't want to do that. Um, in part, and another part is that even once the deal is done, there's certain things that by securities regulation we're allowed to talk about, and others that we're not. I'm just going to leave that to the side for now. In terms of the public company side, going forward, there will continue to be a need on an ongoing basis, in some way, shape, or form. We burn around 750,000 in just keeping the public company overhead going forward on an annual basis, and that doesn't go away. And so we will continue to need and to do funding rounds, to take care of the needs on the public company side, and that's something that Blake will continue to do on a need be basis, as we're in a situation where we like to do what I call, just in time, financings, where we try to keep the funding rounds small, especially, when our markets are low, and we, try to do them just as we absolutely need them, and to try to minimize dilution, and hopefully in the meanwhile, while we stretch budgets out as thin as we can, we hope that for some of these other events to come through that will improve the fundamentals, so that any future raises that we do can be done at a less dilutive range. But it's it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg scenario, in that it takes money to do the work that we need to do to get news, to generate interest, and so on. So it's a difficult battle sometimes, because like I said, it's a little bit of chicken and the egg, and mining is it's an expensive venture. I mean, just things like environmental study, and we got it really cheap. The group that we used, which is top drawer, group, which is the Mining Institute of Zeman, and they are extremely reputable, and they do work for governments and big companies, and not just in the mining field, but anywhere and everywhere where environmental studies are required. They are there to do the studies, and the quality of their work is not questioned. And I know of other companies that have used them, and their costs have been up around €750,000 for doing it. And we did that with them for a small fraction of that. So we are counting the pennies as we can. But there are needs. There are real costs in any mining venture, and especially to generate the news that everybody wants. Everybody wants news, but news comes at a certain cost. That cost being that we need to do the actual work and the studies, which cost money to generate the news that people want. So it's a bit of an ongoing battle.
To avoid shareholder dilution, are there options to sell an offtake agreement on the boron resources?
So repeat once more, just because of the echo I'm getting.
To avoid shareholders dilution, are there options to sell an offtake agreement on the boron resources?
Got it. Yes is the short answer. It's and it possibly will come. And I said possibly because of the nature of the potential joint ventures that we're talking about. And I can't go into any specifics. But we might be in I'm trying to answer your question without saying anything that divulges more than I'm allowed to with respect to our negotiation. The structure of the deals that we're working on now would involve one or a couple of very large buyers who would likely have an appetite for, if not all, substantially all of our future production. And so those deals are being structured in such a way where those participants are not looking at offtakes, they're looking at equity participation in the project itself. If we were not going that route, if we weren't going the route of having large potential partners who have an appetite for essentially the whole deposit, and we were just selling it piecemeal to potential buyers, then it would open the door more to offtakes. It's difficult, though, even at this stage. I doubt very much that we would be able to attract offtakes here and now. You've got to be substantially closer. You've probably got to be within 6 months or less of production before you're going to attract offtakes of any substance. There's companies that will sign meaningless agreements with you saying, yeah, sure, we'll buy something from you someday at some price, maybe. You can get useless agreements like that often. But if you want an actual upfront payer for offtake, generally you've got to be within a few months of production, not years away from production.
Thanks for that, Tim. All right, here's sort of a market question. Can you talk about the TSXV requirement for a listed stock to remain above 5 cents and its impact on Bone? Could this lead to a share consolidation?
Um, no, so there's no requirement for the market to be above 5 cents. And consolidations are always at the option of the company, not the TSX. So I really don't have much more to say about that. That you're not there's not an obligation to maintain a 5 cent market.
Okay. There was a question that was put in the chat, not the Q&A. I'll just ask it. I'm not even sure here. I have asked this before. Is a new valuation in the works?
So let me mute myself again. Um, I I think when somebody says valuation, they're probably using that term wrong, especially if they ask if there's a new valuation, because there's never been a valuation done on us. A valuation is talking about uh, somebody, generally a mining analyst, that is deciding what the company is worth based on the fundamentals of the company. We're not allowed to do that ever. That can only be done by an independent mining analyst. But I don't even think that's what this question is actually referring to. I think what they're actually asking is not for evaluation, but a net present value of potential cash flow, of future streams of revenue in the company. Um, and that can be done through either a PEA, a pre-feasibility, or a feasibility study. We can't do that. That's got to be done, it's got to be authored by an independent QP, a qualified person, which is a mining engineer, a geologist who's arm's length from us. And it has to be done through a qualifying National Instrument 43101 report. And which means a publicly available feasibility study, PEA, or pre-feasibility. And at at this point, there's no intention for us to do a a, a 43101 compliant feasibility study. And the reason why is because our our mining documentation actually exceeds the level of accuracy than a feasibility study does. Um, and so for us to spend the time and money to take a step backwards, and feasibility studies, by the way, especially public company, um, you know, 43101 compliant feasibility studies are not inexpensive. Last time I priced it, and it's been a little while ago, and you're looking at the better part of $1 million to do that, um, and and probably a year, even though the engineering firms will tell you that they'll have it done in 6 months. They never do, and it's always closer to a year. And so from our perspective, is it worth spending a year and $1 million to do a document that is actually going to be less useful to us than the actual mine design plans that we will already have and that we'll have spent a few $1 million on. Um, and so it becomes a useful document as in that case, not to help us develop a mine, but as a marketing tool only. Because as I said, in this case, we would actually have documentation that exceeds the feasibility study in terms of its specificity, its accuracy, its reliability. And so mm, um, to spend that sort of money just on a marketing document doesn't make sense. And sometimes it does. Sometimes we're looking for um, some funding that, maybe on the debt side with some, quasi-government agencies that want to see that public market feasibility. So there's different scenarios that might exist that, might necessitate us doing that. But we have to weigh in. Does it make sense to spend the time and money that it will cost to produce a document that is less useful to us than the combination of documents that we will, by Serbian law, have to produce, which is the Serbian feasibility study followed by the mine design and processing plans. And so we have to decide if that's something we want to spend the money on or not.
Well, Tim, thank you very much. We've gone about an hour and 27 minutes.
Mhm.
Thank you to all the attendees and got all the questions in there asked and answered. So that's great. Um, Everybody, I think, here knows how to contact you if they want to have a one-on-one. You can, Tim's pretty easy to get a hold of there, send him an email. But that concludes our event today. So I'm going to log off and just say thank you very much to everybody for joining.
Okay, yeah, and as would I. Um, Thanks to everybody. I'm looking down the list here, and I see a lot of names up and down the list that I recognize and that I consider to be not only loyal shareholders but friends as well. And once again, I mean this that this is our company together. We're only where we're at because of the dedication and the patience and the support and loyalty of all you people that continue to support us, and we're going to do our best to make us all a whole lot happier in the near future. So I appreciate everybody's time here today. And yeah, follow up with us with any other questions that you might have. Everybody knows how to get a hold of Blake, so feel free. Okay. Talk to you soon.